So you found our podcast. We are Mind Beyond the Mission. This is a podcast about veterans and their families, and specifically mental health. What goes on in our lives, what goes on in our heads. We're not talking to you as doctors or professionals. We're talking to you about living with it and what it's like. Brian McKenna, 19 years in the Canadian Forces. I'm joined by my partner, Laryssa Lamrock.
Veteran family member. I'm a proud military brat. My husband served in the military, proud military mom. And we're really excited about this podcast to delve into issues that are important to the veteran and family community.
So join us as we talk about mental health from the perspective of veterans and their families. And we're back with another episode of Mind Beyond the Mission. We're in studio in Ottawa, which is how I prefer to do things.
Yes.
And we are caffeinated, which is...
Not fully.
Not.
I'm just saying not fully, but we'll get there.
Okay, so the only coffee you have, I got you.
Yes.
So I want to take credit for whatever level of caffeination you're at. And we're joined today by Nick McCarthy. And Nick's a gentleman that knows a lot about military history. He actually works with the folks at Beechwood, Beechwood being the National Cemetery of Canada. And up at Beechwood, not so far from where we're at here, we joined him for a really emotional and moving event a couple years ago where we got to see the National Military Cemetery of Canada. Was eye-opening for me in a lot of ways, which we're going to get into. And I wanted to talk to Nick today because Nick's involved in so much more than just that cemetery. The conversation of connecting Canada to its military community is one I've wanted to have a long time. So welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great event a few years back, but that's quite a tall ask for this podcast. So
yeah,
we can get into it.
You think I use this phrase at work of what it's like to come down the escalator, and what I mean by that is, anyone who you go touring France for 6 months, I expect you to be changed, but you go to Afghanistan or any of the above, and then you come home. And it can be a little bit of a shock to find Canada just doing what Canada does. And for me, I felt disconnected from the people at the bottom of the escalator, those that were just like me this morning, elbowing their way towards the Starbucks, trying to get to their flight. And I found myself thinking, something to the effect of, do these guys know where we just were? And I think the answer to that in a lot of ways is, yeah, Canada knows, but it could know more. And we could maybe do a better job of connecting. What do you think about that?
I definitely agree. I think when it comes to sort of actually understanding what happens in combat, understanding what goes on in military missions across the world, we tend to underestimate Canada's importance, right? We look at what we're doing in Europe right now, especially in the Latvian front, right? Training in the Ukraine, we're training. So I think what most Canadians, they have a sense of appreciation, a sense of a duty of remembrance. But do they actually fully understand the complexities of war and what our men and women go through from day to day? I'm not sure, but I think it's getting better. I think people are starting to really understand Canada's sort of middle power as one of these great militaries, which we've always been. We had a great reputation after World War II. We continued that. We have troops that serve all around the world, and there's a reason we get asked to go bring troops and train people and teach people the Canadian art of war.
So I'm curious, just to set some groundwork, first, why is a Canadian National Military Cemetery important? And explain more then about the tie-in for history and commemoration, just kind of as you were speaking to, and then we can kind of get deeper into that. So yeah, why is a National Military Cemetery important? What makes it different? And how does that then lean into your role as historian?
I'll start with sort of Ottawa itself, right? So Ottawa itself, when we were Bytown, we were very much a military outpost, right? You think Colonel By, the Army Corps of Engineers, buildings. So from our very moments of our creation, Ottawa was meant to be a military installation. Even Parliament Hill was meant to be a star citadel, sort of very much like Quebec City.
Yeah, defendable position, yeah.
And you can imagine from the mouth. So Beechwood itself grows from this mentality, and the first monument we ever started with at Beechwood was a military monument. artillery. So the artillery guys love the fact that the first military and the oldest military monument in Ottawa is an artillery monument. So I always get artillery people excited about that. But when it comes to the sort of the slow evolution, right, we see Beechwood starting to have family plots with military folk. We start seeing a last post fund for those post South Africa, post World War I soldiers. And there's tragic stories in there where the next of kin is the Minister of Defense. It's a funeral home that no longer exists. So there's all these tragic stories within that, but at least they received a dignified burial.
Okay.
Then you flash forward to World War II, we find ourselves building a Commonwealth war grave cemetery, which makes sense because we're training people from around the world to become pilots. We're training people in the art of war here in Ottawa and around the community. And then we build a veteran section for those who came back after the war and who died of their service. And then in 2001, they really decided to build something important. And that's where the National Military Cemetery of the Canadian Forces, that modern one, right? The long one that faces east, the sun rises over our headstones. It dries them out. It makes sure that no soldier's ever cold. And it's a very old tradition, but it's very much built as a regimental cemetery. So the importance of military cemeteries as a whole, be it regimental cemeteries in our community, be it the National Military Cemetery here in Ottawa, is that we need a place of honor. And when you have people who come, who have served all across the country, all across the world, they would have served a portion of their period here in Ottawa. Without a doubt, maybe trained up in Petawawa, which is close enough, let's say.
Or deployed out of Trenton.
Exactly. So the whole idea is that you have a space where people are unified. But you also have a space where they can be remembered. They can be with people they've served with, but they can also be buried together in a way that is familiar, in a way that we'd have seen in battlefields of before 1970. And it's very much an important place. But cemeteries themselves, they have a service, and the service is to act as a place of remembrance. The French do it right. They have this term called le devoir de souvenir, the duty of remembrance. But the difference with the French, they honor the death of the individual, not the service. And that's where our National Military Cemetery is quite different. We honor the service. So it's that dash, all those years that the individual served.
Okay.
I learned something when I went up there. And one of my questions, to you as we were talking about doing this podcast was, how do we make the average Canadian just know that one piece more about their Canadian military community that they might not have? But there I was walking Beechwood when Huff and I went up there to do the recce for that event. And the CSIS cemetery is up there. And that surprised me. I wasn't expecting that. And the second I saw it, I thought, of course, Canada's spies are going to be somewhere. This is CSIS. Of course they'll be up here. Of course it makes sense that there's Corrections Service of Canada and there's, RCMP and some of these different things across the country. It makes sense. But I'd never thought about it till I seen it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of my point. I found as I went there to prepare for an event that was there to educate my staff, my colleagues, I was learning some stuff too about Canada.
And I think that's the joy, right? It doesn't matter how long you've been in the military, how long you've served, your level of history. There's always stories to be told, and there's always different moments that we can share. A couple of weeks ago, our sacred space was full. I gave a lecture on 200 years of military history at Beechwood, and we had people who were in the militaries for the Order of St. George.
Yeah.
And we had a whole bunch of people in the room, and even General Hillier was there, who has his spot at Beechwood as well. And he turns to me, he's like, I didn't know half of that. And he's like, I was CDS. So I think there's so many stories, and it's not because we don't learn it, it's because we don't retain it. And to be taught history in a way that matters is how we need to approach it. The dates, we all have supercomputers in our pocket. We can Google the date. You can find out exactly. It's the stories that matter, the individuals, it's the regiments, it's the groups, it's understanding the implications of, let's say, Operation Market Garden.
Yeah.
Why was that operation so important, and how did we play a role? We take a look at that operation. We take a look at the liberation of Holland. We know the players. We know the people who signed. And then you can flash forward to Ottawa at the same period where we have a princess being born. So again, it's all these moments. And I think even as a youth, when I was being taught history, it was all about smacking those dates. It was telling you those dates are what matters. This is what you're going to get tested.
Right. Tested. I was just going to say, this sounds like you're going to give me a test tomorrow and I'll flunk it.
But the whole point is you should be teaching people about the implications and what war meant to Canada at a certain point, right? Why was Vimy Ridge so important? It doesn't matter what the date is. We can look it up. But what happened in that moment? What was the sacrifice? And why is that monument so important? And I think that's what we do. And as you walk through Beechwood, the National Military Cemetery, you're always confronted with these individuals that have served, who've either died from their wounds, came back from Afghanistan. And it's quite moving in that sense that we have this connection. And people don't take the time to sort of stop and think and learn about these individuals.
I think it's that connection that makes the date stick, that makes those events stick. And I want to thank you for being a keeper of a lot of those stories. And you'd mentioned earlier, too, that national military cemeteries are important to be a place of honor. And Beechwood certainly has that. Like, just coming onto the grounds, you can feel something different. It's absolutely beautiful. And you can feel that sense of honor and respect just on the grounds. It's very peaceful and beautiful. But going back to that connection, can you share, like when we did that tour and had the staff, the Atlas staff with us, you shared a lot of really compelling stories. And so would you mind sharing something that might, offer some of that connection? And I'll leave it there.
I'm going to share moments. And I think that'll get it. So one of my favorite moments is I was waiting on Remembrance Day for a tour. And it was the Governor General at the time, not name dropping, just saying who it was. So I was just waiting. It was after her official duties. It was something the Governor General does whenever we have a new one. A really wonderful way to do it. I take them through on a private tour. No media, no nothing.
Poignant now because the new transition will be occurring.
Exactly. So I'm standing there and this older lady comes up to me and she's like, "Oh, who are you waiting for?" So I'm sort of just chit-chatting with her and she's like, "I have a friend who's buried over there, my former neighbor." And I'm like, "Who's that?" She's like, "Harry." I'm like, "Harry who?" She's like, "Oh, he was some kind of general." I'm like, "Harry Criar, the commander of the 1st Canadian." And she's like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And so I'm like, "How did you know him?" She's like, "He was the nice old guy in our neighborhood who would give us candy." So after his war, he walked around and it really humanized him, right? For me, I viewed him more in the Omar Bradley way. If you read Bradley's biography, it talks about Criar as one of the greatest logistic minds in that period. And this is Omar Bradley, who was a logistics specialist as well. So I think that's one moment. My favorite moment recently was a few years ago. We had Princess Marguerite unveil a plaque for General Folks in front of General Folks' only living descendants. So the princess came when she came to Ottawa last time. It was just such a moment because she honored the man who liberated her country, and the Dutch do it right? The kids go to the cemetery, they take care of the Canadian war graves, they teach about our role, but they also do duties outside. And the princess is coming back again this week, so there'll be a lot of duties in that sense as one of her final trips, if you will. So that's some of my favorite moments. But again, everyone has a story, right? And like we can talk about Corporal Jack, right? Corporal Jack was part of the Devil's Brigade. Only Devil's Brigader on the planet to have an actual Devil's Brigade, not ensign, but the double arrows on his head.
Right, okay.
Because they weren't around long enough to get an ensign. So very much in those moments, right? But it's also when we have these conversations with people who are at ceremony, who are part of ceremonies, that's really the meaningful part, that they feel connected, that the veterans have a place to go, the active service men and women have a place that is theirs, and it's just only theirs.
You know, for me, like when I connect this to mental health, for me, the root is just, it's so clear. We do a lot of work these days with helping people tell their stories in their own voice, make sure that when their story comes out, it's theirs. They're their own editor. They get to tell when it gets used. But what do we do when we're gone? And at the end of the day, if your story's going to continue when you're gone, someone else is telling it. And I look at, the War Museum in town here. I have such mixed emotions when I see some of the stuff that I slept in, drove in, worked in. For one, I certainly feel old. Like, how the heck is my stuff in a museum piece now? But it is. But the pride of that is like, okay, maybe someone will tell our story. And I've wanted to tell the story, but I've also really enjoyed standing back and hearing how someone else would tell it, right? And I think that's a big thing because, when we're talking about Market Garden and when we're talking about the advance through Italy, that means someday we'll be talking about Op Medusa, and we'll be talking about, Canada can talk about those things. And so I wanted to ask you, what are you seeing today? Because we talked earlier and you said that you've got events going on where the participation's growing. And that's not what I thought I would hear from you, but I'm happy to hear that. What do you see and what do you attribute it to?
I think we're getting more and more awareness, right? I have a really sort of cherished position. I love what I do, right? It's pretty easy that you can tell. We've known each other for years, so you can tell. We've really pushed it out, right? And we'll start at the teacher level. You have some amazing teachers across the country and across the city that are doing programs and participating in programs like No Stone Left Alone. There's a few high schools that adopt a grave, and they do all the research. They find out where the person served. Typically, it's World War II back because those files are public. But they at least adopt, and I have one teacher who comes every year, and I give the students a tour, and the students have to present me who they're the individuals.
Interesting.
Okay.
And so not only do they take a look at who the individual is, they look how it fits in the larger conflict and how, when and where they served. So it really gives a wholesome place. And we're seeing that more and more. I think technology is helping. The database is being accessible, being able to connect a little more. But I think we've also opened up ceremony to a lot more people, right? And the minute you start taking necessarily the regiment leads, or the element leads, but you start inviting people, you start inviting public, you start getting a child to come up and read the commitment to remember. And to me, that's always an incredible moment. So I think we're seeing growth. Like last year was a smaller year for our Remembrance Day ceremony because it snowed, but we were like 3,500 people. But we've been 4,000. We're etching closer to 5,000 every year. So it's, again, what you do is throughout the year, we start with these small ceremonies. So May 4th, we have Dutch Remembrance. Mm-hmm. And it's with the Dutch community, members of the diplomatic corps, children, youth, and you have a youth. You always have to have a youth. And then you lay a wreath, and that's the start of the program for the year. And we go all the way to December with different programming. But at every moment, people start connecting, and they start understanding. They start seeing how they themselves, even if they didn't serve it, their family didn't serve, but as a Canadian, they're part of something bigger. They're part of a larger world. They're part of a larger culture that they not necessarily knew they were part of. And you can put that with the RCMP as the Provo Corps, right? The MPs. I know a lot of soldiers don't like MPs, but
they do break up the odd party.
And they do have a purpose. But like you have the Provo Corps, you have a bunch of different moments that we can celebrate throughout the year. And then in Ottawa being the embassy location as well, right? We have so many of these smaller ceremonies that are also getting larger now.
Okay.
I do a private ceremony with the Aussies and the Kiwis independently the week before Remembrance Day, where we lay wreaths for almost a dawn service, because at that time dawn is like 6 a.m. It's like a 7 o'clock service. But I think people are just more aware, and they're getting out to cemeteries more. They're learning a little bit more. They're seeing it. And I think having it more accessible, having micro stories out there. We do a lot of video content, a lot of blog posting, and you can see sort of Remembrance Day, that starts to spike on our traffic. People are starting to watch the videos. But I think there's a sense of, and we talked about this a little bit, there's a sense of need to connect to something larger. And I think if you're Canadian, there's what is to be Canadian, but also that we're part of this greater military family, let's say, that has served our country so well. And you think of moments throughout our history that our identity is tied specifically to military campaigns, from Vimy, which is a success, to Dieppe, which I hope it gets revised into something else, to Juno Beach, right? And there's nothing more poignant for Canadians than to tie our identity to these nation-building moments, and the military was the nation-building moment for those.
One of my deployments in Afghanistan, I was not working directly for Canadians in a very multinational organization. And it was a Royal Marine, and then a soldier from the French Army came to me. We just lost a Canadian when I was there. And they'd said to me that in their opinion, they thought Canada was the gold standard on what I would call ramp ceremonies and the Highway of Heroes. They were blown away. And what they thought was that theirs were coming back at night, and theirs were coming back almost clandestinely, like almost let's move these dead soldiers' remains back to our countries quickly. And they were flipping on the news and they were seeing the firemen. It makes me emotional just thinking about it, right? But my mental image right now of people remembering our conflict is fire trucks on overpasses on the highway here in Ontario. And to hear other countries say, you guys do this right, it was an interesting thing for me, but it leads me today when you just said the Dutch do it right. What do you mean? And what do you think maybe what we could learn from what the Dutch do?
So I think let's start with the ramp ceremony. Right?
Yeah.
The ramp ceremony was a Canadian construct. We developed it. It was medical staff in Afghanistan who developed it after the loss of 16 soldiers, right? One has to remember that we didn't repatriate until after 1970. And if we find anybody who passed away before 1970, we bury them within the closest military cemetery to where they were found.
Okay.
It's called casual identification support.
Yeah, you died in Korea. You're still in Korea.
Up until 1970.
Yeah.
So I think when the ramp ceremony itself, I think what made it so poignant, it was a visual, but it was a way for Canadians across the country to show respect. And that's what the Highway of Heroes became. Yeah. And even when Beechwood built our laneway to the main monument, it's a ramp for a reason.
Oh, wow. Okay, I hadn't thought of it that way.
But it's a ramp for a reason, and that's why it's a ramp, to emulate the ramp ceremony that those soldiers that we lost are there. But when I say the Dutch do it right, it's the education program, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's the communing with the cemeteries. It's going out, and like Christmas Eve, you'll have lights on headstones in Canadian cemeteries, and it's Dutch school children and Dutch teachers do that together. The community gets involved. And I think we're starting to see that in Canada, and I think we're growing. Like I'm a proud member of No Stone Left Alone. I'm the Ontario Regional Coordinator. And through my tenure as the Regional Coordinator, Ontario's exploded. But again, I have access to the cemetery network and to get them on board. That's never a challenge. Of course, they want people in their cemeteries. But if you have the program already primed when a teacher comes. So we've seen a growth of these kids coming in, doing a remembrance ceremony and being the lead in remembrance ceremonies. And I think that's what we forget to do. It's don't put the kids to the side. When you're teaching, don't shame them into wearing a poppy. Have them come out and say, I need to wear a poppy. I need to remember. I need to know why that these moments in Canadian history are so important. And I think if you have a kid lay a wreath in remembrance, it changes everything for that child. And
and the vets watching.
Well, and the vets watching. So like my kids have always been around military. And the year before last, my daughter read the Act of Remembrance at the Beechwood Remembrance Day ceremony. But she didn't look up until after she was done. So she had her back to the crowd. She was sitting facing the monument. And then got up and read, did a great job. I was super proud of her. And then I saw her look up and she saw vets, soldiers, people of the community. And it was this moment for her. She's like, okay, I'm tied to something bigger.
Connection. And as you're speaking and you disclosed as we were prepping, getting our mic set up and everything here, and I was downing my coffee as quickly as I could about the sheer number of events that Beechwood is doing. So as you're chatting, like I'm thinking that the connection you're creating is very intentional. And that's why you have more and more people coming to your events, more youth and children interested in being active and asking to wear the poppy. I remember when I was, in school back in the day, was asked to read the Act of Remembrance in front of my school. But there was no connection there. It was me being tasked to do something at an assembly, which was meaningful to me because my father at that time had served. But I didn't have that same connection. And I think it's important for young people as they are coming to Nick to tell you about which soldier they have chosen and they will, present to you. I think that through the research and understanding that it was someone who maybe wasn't much older than they are, that maybe had similar interests, that left brothers and sisters behind. And so, yeah, you folks are really being intentional in creating opportunities for connection and evolving in what is meaningful for youth. Now, before it was reading the Act of Remembrance at an assembly, but your programming is so much more than that. It sounds like it's so many more opportunities through the year, as you were saying. We
do about 150 events a year, not all military, of course, but I would say probably a third are military. And it's anything from historical nights to talks to documentary screenings to, of course, remembrance ceremonies. A lot of tours, right? And the the Canadian Armed Forces has been really great. I've been able to. They can use education time off to come to Beechwood, and I'll give them a tour. And I've had the Padres to the CDS to Topshee to you name it. Come health services. The Padres are always fun to take around. The whole crew, right? The whole gambit. But I think last year it was sort of like 30 or 40 groups throughout the military who are doing these private tours with us. And they themselves are seeing how they're connected. But I think all these different ceremonies, the whole goal is that we can have individual ceremonies for different moments, right? We can have it for Dutch Remembrance. We can have it for Ukrainian Remembrance, French, Irish, English, what have you, right? Battle of Britain, Battle of the Atlantic, what have you, right? Korea, Afghanistan. The whole goal, though, is to move everyone so that on November 11th, we are united as one, so that we've commemorated all these moments. And now on Remembrance Day, we're united. It's only one.
We were speaking earlier about Friday. You've got this Ukrainian contingent coming by. And you know what I first thought when I heard that is like, well, for one, you could certainly forgive the Ukrainians for being a little preoccupied with what they're going on with right now. Their nation is under attack, and yet they're coming to commemorate VE Day. Yeah. They're, with all that's going on in the Ukrainian world right now, they're coming up to Beechwood and remembering World War II and sacrifices there. And that to me is just phenomenal, you know, and that's the kind of thing that it does make me smile a little bit because someone does care and someone does remember. I think that's the tie between what's going on in your line of work and the mental health of veterans today. Is like, if communities in Canada will be remembering my friends 50, 60 years from now, and maybe some kid will be talking about people that we lost and giving a presentation to the new Nick McCarthy up there, that's a real positive story.
I think if anybody's going to take anything away from this talk is that people do care. You don't always see it because you're not there, right? As somebody who is there on a regular basis, the amount of care that a student will take to lay a poppy, touch the grave, call out the name, right? And it's, regardless if the person's passed away or not, it's the respect to the service. And I think if it's one of those ideas, right? If only vets that are struggling could see what the kids see when they're looking at those headstones and feel what those kids are feeling, I think it would be a game changer, right? And to see that is incredible. And I think, again, it's the ability to connect. And I think that's what we need to do better at.
I hope it's okay and appropriate for me to talk about something that was poignant for me. And I had the visual of, you know, children reaching out and saying the name. What I also did notice was coins on headstones. And I think to me that is an ultimate form of connection and respect. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we do have coins, and then we'll have people place stones as well. So two different traditions.
Okay.
One, the stones typically associated to Jewish tradition. You find a stone when you're going to the cemetery, put in your pocket. It's considered a mitzvah. But because we're so multicultural, everyone does it now. Okay. And that's just telling the family they're there. The coins themselves, it was after the Vietnam that started it in U.S. cemeteries. And it was really with the African-American veterans. It was a way for them to communicate on their headstones who they were and how they were connected. So the larger the coin amount, the value, the closer you were to their death was. And then every coin has a different meaning. You either served with them, you either did basic training, or you were there the day they died. So again, it's an incredible way of communication. And for those like me, you can see and you can understand exactly what's going on and who visits.
And I think about the families too. If a family goes there and sees the coins that were there. Like
one of his mates visited this year because there's that nickel.
Yes, right? and they were remembered and cared for,
So it is, it's very poignant. And you have that, and then you'll have Remembrance Day when families come and they see a poppy laid as well. That's a really great one. We do headstone cleaning twice a year now. In the fall, leading to Remembrance Day. And the amount of people that come on a Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon for that is incredible. I think last year we were 400 each day. And it was just a moment where you have people taking the time, looking at the headstone, ensuring that it's clean, cleaning it over, and then moving to the next. And we had vets, we had active members, we had family. It hit me last year. There was this one girl, her father was serving, and the media asked her, "Why are you here?" And she's like, "Because I want somebody to clean my father's headstone."
Mm-hmm, me too.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if you look at a place like Beechwood, I think your property up there is magnificent. It's stunning when you get up there, especially when you come over that hill where the big cairn is, and you look down and just see, the row upon row. But there are veterans in this country buried in unmarked graves, right? Mm-hmm. How does that happen?
So that's an interesting one because sometimes we lose track of people. I'll use the RCMP as a good example. So Assistant Commissioner Ames, really high up assistant commissioner, he retires from Ottawa, moves to Victoria, and passes away with no family. And there's a guy, Joe Healy, who runs the RCMP grave database, and he couldn't find him. And eventually he was found in a cabinet in a funeral home, cremated.
Right.
And because there was nobody left. So we ended up bringing him back to Beechwood. He was buried with honors. We have a veterans group that they come and they do the service. They act as an honor guard. And I think that's what typically happens. People retire or they lose that connection or they don't do their services. I don't mean this to be a plug, but like everyone should be doing a pre-need and to know where you're going to end up. I think that's important. But I think just some people never make it back from the war. And I think it's a lack of mental health services. It's a lack of support. It's a lack of connection. And it's a shame because I think everyone, if you think Last Post, the entire point of the Last Post Fund was to provide dignified burial grounds. And so that's always available. And you have the Last Post Fund. They do incredible work. We have a section that takes care of them, makes sure that they get their honors, that they receive the dignified burial they deserve. But if they pass away on the street and they don't have any ID,
right?
How do we know that they served, right? And so that's a hard one, and there's no good answer. I could say like Vet's House is a great example of a place that gives space and a home for veterans who are not doing well. So I think you have all these organizations that are starting to pop up that are doing the right thing, that are doing right for the country, and I think it's a model that's expandable.
And I think, for this and other mental health issues, that the onus to some degree is on veterans to know how to navigate systems, to reach out. And in here, one thing that stands to reason is I've run into a lot of vets who haven't filled out their will since their last deployment 26 years ago. And that will was good enough for the Army to know what to do with you if you passed away in Croatia. Yeah. But now your life has changed and you've moved on, and it's probably time to dust that thing off again and give it a look. Also, though, I think we have to be willing to tell our stories. The week around Remembrance Day, I'll tell you, is when schools reach out and they want someone to come in, and you do one or two and you might turn down the third or fourth. How do you think vets can be part of, outside of Remembrance Week, contributing to their own storytelling?
I think the one thing that people have to realize is you can take a look at the education curricula online and see when they're teaching what. And I think everyone thinks that, they're only teaching military history during Veterans Week, right? You have 11 days a year, and that's not true. They're teaching it as part of Canadian history. So if you start connecting with a school and be like, I'd like to be able to come in and talk. And like, if we're talking about a specific period in Canadian history, I'm happy to come in and have a conversation. Like
your own school.
Exactly.
The ones you have a connection to.
Exactly. And I think that's an easy way for vets to share the story, because it is not fair for veterans the week of Remembrance Day to be having to commit to so much, because it's a day of mourning, right? Remembrance Day is a day where people deserve that dignity. They deserve that moment where they can reflect themselves. They can go to a ceremony, participate, or be a watcher, be part of it. But I think that's the key. Reach out outside of periods, right? Or join, like we do some No Stone Left Alone events in Ontario in May as part of this season, so that schools at the end of their school year are doing things. I'm going to have school groups at the end of middle of June coming for tours as their end of season, end of school, so they can clink it all together, right?
And do you see you guys, in regards to Beechwood, getting more and more online accessible as things go on, in so much as it sounds like really great for the high school teacher who's right around the corner? What could someone who's teaching kids in Vancouver, what can they do?
So we're working on a full partnership with Memory Anchor. So Memory Anchor is an app that you can download. We'll have the Beechwood Explorer app, and you can actually visit the headstones. Some of the monuments are completely, it's VR, so you can actually put the monument on the table through your cell phone.
Oh, wow.
And take a look at it. So some of our monuments are already like that. So we're working towards that. I just rebuilt the site last week. So it's sort of, it's getting there. It's getting back to where I need it to be. But I think there's so many resources out there. Of course, Beechwood. I'm going to promote Beechwood. We have a blog. We have a Substack, Instagram, Twitter, full YouTube channel where we tell these stories and we share in bite-sized portions, right? We have a flying overviews with drones, and we're going to re-drone our section because we've got more assets that I want to make sure that we highlight. But I think if you're in BC, find your local cemetery, contact them, and go in and take a look, because service is all across the country. There's no cemetery I know of in Canada that doesn't at least have one headstone for a military soldier. But I think it's also taking a look and seeing that sometimes it's not your traditional granite headstone that we all commonly know. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the family marks on the headstone information. And I think of Frederick Sherwood, right? So he was a submariner, Canada's most decorated submariner in Halifax. The submarine training facility is actually called the Frederick Sherwood Training Facility. And he's buried at Beechwood, just Frederick Sherwood. I would have never known that he was Canada's most decorated submariner. I just happened to run into his family who was coming for a visit. And they're like, well, told me the story. And I'm like, okay, I need to know more. And they're like, don't worry, we'll bring a book. That's always something I like. If you bring me a history book, I'm always game for that. So full plug on that end. But they share this wonderful book, and it's this whole history about the individual. And so I read the book right away and then did a whole video about him so that we can have his story and where he's located. And eventually that'll be tagged with Memory Anchor. The video will be there, the story, and then the family can add thoughts and the community can add thoughts.
I want to shift a little bit to the other side of the story. I think military families have a lot of stories to tell. For example, throughout some of the key points in history, World War I, World War II, families holding things together here, many women working in munitions factories. I mean, they have incredible stories as well. And there's been a bit of an evolution, it sounds like, particularly with Beechwood, on how families are kind of included. We were chatting before about how military cemeteries before were exclusive to someone who had served, but things have changed a little bit at Beechwood.
So when you think of the evolution of military cemeteries, right? Most people think Arlington, the big U.S. cemetery. It's a military base. It's a direct benefit. The longer you serve, the more likely you're going to be in the ground hole. That's Arlington rule. But when a spouse dies, the spouse is facing forward, but when the service member dies, the headstone gets turned around. The spouse now faces backwards, and the military, the serving member, faces forward. So that's the American way. The battlefield way, which is what our model is from, was always the service member because the family wasn't there. Beechwood, when we developed the designated next of kin. So it's whoever you feel is important to you. And if you walk through, you'll see sons and daughters. You'll see, of course, spouses. And then most of the time you have double serving spouses. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have the irony of having a Navy and Air Force badge on top of each other.
Right, yeah.
There's no specific rules on who gets to go on top or not. That's a family decision. I'm going to tell you, Beechwood will never tell a family who goes on top, and doesn't matter on rank. That's your business. We don't get paid enough to help with that family dynamic. Right. And I'm just being funny, but I think when you look at regimental cemeteries, they're moving over to the +1, right? Which is a big deal. We're looking at expanding our military section into 109, which is the next phase. Mm-hmm. And there's talks about having family plots.
Okay.
So that's going to be another evolution we see.
Yeah.
But then we look at, you mentioned the CISA Cemetery and the RCMP Cemetery. those are not regimental cemeteries. They're national memorial cemeteries. And what they did is when we designed and we worked with the RCMP, the veterans and all that, we actually designed it in such a way that it's full family members. It's full families together. And the idea was that an individual doesn't serve as a standalone. An individual serves and the family serves as well.
Took the words out of my mouth, Nick.
And I'm always very cognizant of thanking families for their service. I think if I'm emceeing an event, there's always a thank you for the service, to remember the service of the families. And we try to get the families to lay a wreath for in memoriam or something like that, right? The RCMP, when we do services with them, ceremonies, there's always a family wreath for the families. Super simple, super easy, but it acknowledges the role that families have of keeping everything together so that when somebody's on mission or abroad or working, they don't have anything to fear at home.
So as we wrap up here, I'd like to just spend a little bit talking about healing. You know, places like Beechwood, it's obvious what we're doing there. The deceased person is being interred and we're doing the proper way. You know, what does military honors mean? Well, it means that if they were still here, they'd be seeing the proper service happen. But it's also for everyone else who's in the room or everyone else that's at the location. What do you see happening in the way of healing in your job? What do you see happening in that regard? And do you notice a difference between the services themselves and then when someone, say, comes back a month or two later on their own to have their own quiet moment? What do you see there?
I think, first of all, when we're dealing with grief, right, grief is different for everyone. I think anyone who says that there's a timeline for grief doesn't understand grief, right? It ebbs and flows. There's moments that will hit you. So I think that's one thing. The military service, sort of the burial service itself, I think it's important. It gives the respect and the dignity that the individual deserves, that they earned. I think that's one thing. Beechwood also does it a little different because veterans get a military flavor, right? So you don't have to die in service to get the military, the bagpiper, the bugler, everything like that. But I think when it comes to healing, I think there's different moments across the year. We do a Soldiers of Suicide event. Honoring our soldiers' suicide, right? Understanding that suicide only exists because of their service. And we ask the family to submit photos, and we actually project the photos onto the monument. And it's a lovely, lovely service. We have mental health services there as well, St. John's Ambulance as well, Hope. They're all there to speak and make sure the families understand that they're there for them. Moments like that are very healing. And we've had that ceremony has been 3 people. It has been 40, but it doesn't matter because who's going to be there at that moment is who needs that service, that ceremony. So I think when you look at cemeteries as place of healing, it gives that final location where you can have a moment to reflect, or you can be part of something bigger where you don't have to worry about your individual grief. You can be with a community. And I think knowing that the community grieves together is important.
So for thinking of the whole people reaching out to contact, you know, 2 kind of things. If folks want to know more about the different events that are happening at Beechwood, where's the best route for them to go about doing that?
I would say sign up for a newsletter. That's number one. I'm going to plug. We've always had the events all on our website, Facebook, Instagram, social media, all social media. But this time we've got full calendars on our website that you can subscribe to. You can just put it directly into your Outlook calendar with one button now. Really happy with the new site, obviously. So that's the easiest thing. Our newsletter is also a really good one because then you stay up to date on some of the stuff we're doing as well. And then our magazine is another thing that we email and mail out. So that's a great way for people to know what's going on.
And then for, you know, military and military families that are looking at sorting out their own arrangements or seeing if Beechwood's the option that they want to go with, is that the same place they would go to do that?
Yeah, they would just go in our community section. We have defense and securities. It's a specific community on its own. It includes, of course, the National Military Cemetery, the Veterans Section, Auto Police, CSIS, RCMP, the diplomats. But it really gives a fulsome, because of course some people will have served in the military, served in police force, served in the RCMP, and then you see 3 or 4 different badges: CSIS Police, CSIS RCMP, CSIS Air Force, a lot of Air Force in CSIS, obviously. So I think that's the easiest way. We have a bunch of ebooks that are available that people can just download and just understand the practice, where you don't have to commit. You can just see what you need to know. It's a great way to doing it. But other than that, I would just say, if you're in Ottawa, come and take a tour and see.
The reason I wanted to reach out on this was, obviously we'd connected before. You guys put on a really great and educational event for my work colleagues, but I've been following the stuff you've been doing online, and the amount, it's a large amount of what you're doing in, I would say, the education space and the remembrance space. It's also really diverse, all the different conflicts, and just reminding people that, peaceful country, yes, but Canada certainly has a long and proud military history. I'd like to thank Nick McCarthy, a historian, and also, one of the key ways that we got in touch up in Beechwood. You educated me a lot that day, and it was really, really heartwarming to see how some of my friends that have been entrusted in your care up there are being looked after. Thanks for joining us today on Mind Beyond the Mission.
And I also want to thank you, Nick, for what you do, because it is about what's resonating with me right now is connection. And I think I learned a lot more about what you do and what Beechwood provides. And just thank you for the support that you give for our community.
No, it's an honor, right? Like I never served, but I think I'm able to feel like I'm helping the military community, which I've respected my entire life. I mentioned earlier, I do come from a long line of military family, right? People who chose to serve, and some never came back, some came back and never really were here. So it's just a way to sort of honor those people that I admire so much and I respect so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mind Beyond the Mission.
If this conversation resonated with you or helped you in any way, I encourage you to subscribe to Mind Beyond the Mission wherever you listen to your podcasts, so you'll be the first to know when our next episode comes out.
And if you know someone who might relate to what we've shared or could find it helpful, please feel free to send it their way. We're all on the same team.
Plus, we'd love to hear what other topics you'd be interested in us exploring in future episodes. Brian and I have a lot of ideas and subjects we plan to dive into, but you, the listener, have probably experienced or thought of topics that haven't crossed our minds yet.
Please reach out if this is the case. We're on social media at Atlas Veterans CA on most platforms, so please feel free to tweet at us, send us a message, or leave a review on this episode, and let us know what else you'd like to hear us talk about.
Brian, it's always a pleasure having these important conversations with you. Looking forward to next time.
You bet, Laryssa. Take it easy.